All right, let's get right into a really fascinating puzzle from history. We're looking at why the USA, the very country whose president championed the League of Nations, ended up rejecting it. It's a big one, so let's break it down.
I mean, seriously, think about it. You've got President Woodrow Wilson. He's the guy, the main architect behind this whole idea for a new world order after World War I. So how on earth did his own country turn around and say, no thanks? That is the central question we're tackling today.
So to figure this out, we can't just look at the big peace conferences in Europe. Nope, the real story, the real battle for the League was fought right back at home in the good old US of A. This was all about domestic politics. See, in the American system, a president can't just decide to join something like this. Wilson needed Congress to give it the green light. And well, that was going to be a much, much tougher fight than he probably expected.
And you know how politics works. For Wilson's opponents, this wasn't just about foreign policy. Oh no, they saw a massive political opportunity here. The League of Nations became the perfect weapon to use against him and his party.
So how did they actually convince people? Well, they didn't just say, we don't like it. They were much smarter than that. They built a really powerful case against joining the League, and it tapped into some very real fears that people had after the war. Let's dig into what they were. Okay, so if you're revising this topic, this slide is your best friend. It really boils down to these 4 key objections. Each one of these arguments appealed to a different group of Americans, which created this huge wall of opposition. Let's go through them one by one. First off, the Treaty of Versailles. You have to remember, the League and the treaty were completely tied together. The League's job was basically to make sure everyone followed the treaty's rules. But millions of Americans, especially German Americans, absolutely hated the treaty. They thought it was way too harsh on Germany, so they wanted nothing to do with the organization that was going to enforce it. Then you have the memory of the First World War. It was still so fresh, so horrible. Americans had just seen what a European war was like, and the idea of having to send their sons to fight and die in every little dispute all over the globe, it was a complete non-starter. They saw the League as a one-way ticket to getting dragged into more wars. And then, of course, there's the money. One of the League's main tools was supposed to be sanctions, basically cutting off trade to punish countries that misbehaved. But American business leaders were looking at this and thinking, wait a minute, if we have to stop trading with people, isn't that going to hurt our own economy? They were terrified the League would mess with American business. And finally, a lot of Americans were just really suspicious of the big European empires. The US had its own history of breaking away from an empire, right? So the thought of using American soldiers and American money to help Britain and France hold on to their colonies all over the world, it just didn't sit right with a lot of people. So you have all these different arguments swirling around. And sometimes one single image just comes along and explains the whole situation perfectly. In this case, it was a political cartoon that became legendary. Back in 1920, right in the middle of this huge debate, a cartoon was published that just cut through all the noise. It showed everybody in a really simple way exactly what was at stake. So picture this. The cartoon shows the League of Nations as this big, ambitious stone bridge. It's meant to connect all the nations of the world. And there's even a little sign on it that says, designed by the President of the USA. But there's a huge, gaping hole right in the middle of it. Now, if you know anything about building an arch, you know it needs that one central stone at the very top to hold the whole thing together. It's called the keystone. You pull that out and the entire bridge just crumbles. And in the cartoon, that keystone is what's missing. And guess what that missing keystone was labeled? Yep, USA. The message couldn't have been clearer. You can have this great big idea designed by America itself. But if America isn't willing to be the central part of it, the whole thing is unstable. It's doomed to collapse. So, with the politicians fighting against it and a lot of the public feeling nervous, the whole debate started heading toward a final, dramatic conclusion. It was decision time. President Wilson, to his credit, didn't give up. He went on this massive, grueling tour all across the country, trying to convince the American people directly. It actually destroyed his health. He had a major stroke. But even with all that effort, the decision ultimately came down to a vote in the Senate. And in March 1920, they voted. The result was 49 senators for and 35 against. Now you might think, hey, that's a win. But to pass a treaty like this in the US, you need a 2/3 majority. And they didn't have it. The proposal was officially dead.
But wait, there's more. The fight wasn't completely over. The presidential election that same year basically turned into one giant nationwide vote on this one single issue. It was a chance for the American people themselves to have the final say.
And their answer was loud and clear. The Republican candidate, Warren Harding, ran on this super simple but really powerful slogan: a return to normalcy. That's it. It was a promise to forget all this complicated world stuff and just focus on America again. And he won by a landslide.
The decision was made. The people had spoken. So what did that actually mean for the League and for the world?
Well, it meant the USA never joined. When the League of Nations finally opened its doors and all the countries gathered for the first time, there was a seat with America's name on it. And it was empty, just sitting there, a really powerful symbol of what was missing. As our source material puts it so well, America's absence wasn't just some small problem. It was a body blow. I mean, that's a heavy-duty phrase. It suggests the League was critically wounded from the very first day. It never really had a chance to recover. And that leaves us with one of history's biggest what-ifs, doesn't it? If that keystone, the USA, had been put into place, could the bridge have held strong? Could a powerful League, with America at its core, have stopped the rise of dictators in the 1930s and prevented World War II? It's a question we can never really answer, but it's definitely something to think about.